My name is Angela Waldrop. I'm 32 years old, and I never imagined that a single weekend could make me see my entire relationship in a completely different light. If you had asked me not long ago, I would have told you that things between me and my boyfriend, Richard Rayner, were stable. A little uneven at times, yes, but we loved each other. Or at least I believed we did. The problem was never just Richard. It was the gravitational pull of the two women permanently orbiting his life. His younger sister, Chloe, and Chloe's inseparable best friend, Tessa Clark, who also happened to be Richard's ex-girlfriend. I used to laugh it off. I used to tell myself that dating Richard meant accepting the package deal. But the truth is, they never wanted to include me. They wanted me to endure them. Chloe and Tessa called themselves prank people. They treated pranks like a personality trait, something quirky and fun and harmless. But their version of harmless was the kind that curled beneath your ribs and settled there like shame. They lived for other people's panic. They wanted reactions, fear, humiliation. They wanted to watch someone unravel. And Richard, who had grown up with Chloe's chaos, thought it was all normal. To him, it was nostalgia, comfort, just their humor. He didn't see the damage because he'd built immunity to it. I hadn't. Their pranks began small, switching the labels on my spice jars, hiding my glasses, harmless things annoying, but tolerable. Then they escalated. The day they staged a fake tow truck and dragged my car away while I was inside buying groceries, I came outside holding a melting bag of frozen blueberries and nearly passed out from panic. When I called Richard, voice shaking, he put the call on speaker so Chloe and Tessa could laugh along. They even posted the audio online like it was some hilarious podcast episode. Another time, Tessa called, pretending to be from HR to tell me I was being terminated. I cried so hard in the break room, I gave myself a migraine. Richard later said the prank was obvious and that I should have known. He didn't even seem embarrassed that his ex-girlfriend had just emotionally gutted his current partner for entertainment. Moments like that didn't just chip away at me, they carved trenches. Still, I stayed. Because love makes people hopeful. Love makes people stupid. And I kept convincing myself that one day he'd see how much it hurt me. Last weekend was supposed to be peaceful. Richard suggested a hiking trip at a remote state park, saying he wanted us to unplug and reconnect. I agreed, because even after everything, part of me still wanted to be proven wrong about him. Then Chloe invited herself. Then Tessa invited herself to join Chloe. And Richard didn't even hesitate before saying yes. Apparently, solitude doesn't exist when those two are involved. We took my car because it had more room, which really meant Chloe wanted more leg space, and Tessa didn't like the smell of Richard's car. The drive was 2 hours deep into nowhere, just dense forest, narrow dirt roads, and the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something. We parked at a remote trailhead, hiked for a while, ate snacks in a quiet clearing surrounded by tall pines and cold, golden sunlight. For a few minutes, I actually let myself believe they were trying to behave. It was peaceful. No snide comments, no childish jokes. I should have known better. I stepped behind a group of trees to pee. Maybe 30 seconds. When I came back, the clearing was empty. I called Richard's name. Nothing. I called Chloe's, then Tessa's. Nothing. I walked a little way down the trail, expecting them to jump out laughing. Came back. No one. My stomach tightened. The forest suddenly felt far too quiet. Then my phone buzzed. 1 bar of service, pure luck. It was a message from Chloe. Surprise, we borrowed your car. Good luck getting back, LOL. A photo followed, all 3 of them inside my SUV, Richard behind the wheel, Chloe flashing a peace sign, Tessa laughing like she'd just won a prize. The kind of laughter that comes from cruelty, not joy. My heart dropped. The sun was already sliding toward the horizon. I had no keys, no wallet, no water, no jacket. The clearing was turning darker by the minute. We were hours from home in a place where people could disappear in 10 feet of underbrush, and Richard, my boyfriend, thought this was comedy gold. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not fear, something colder, sharper, clarity maybe. A realization that this wasn't a relationship problem, it was a respect problem. A switch flipped inside me, and for the first time in years, I stopped making excuses for him. I dialed 911. Hi, I said when a dispatcher answered my voice steady in that surreal way shock sometimes creates. I need to report a stolen vehicle. The park ranger who rescued me was an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes. When I showed him the text and photo, his expression changed instantly. That's not a prank, he said, voice heavy. That's abandonment. He drove me to the ranger station, helped me charge my dead phone, and offered me water. When my phone lit up, hundreds of notifications cascaded across my screen, missed calls, angry texts, voicemails filled with yelling. From Richard. Are you insane? The cops pulled us over. You reported the car stolen. From Chloe, you're actually psychotic over a joke. From Tessa, girl, you need therapy. Not one single message asked if I was safe. Not one. I stared at their words, my hands still cold from the forest. And for the first time in 4 years, I saw Richard exactly as he was. Someone who didn't protect me. Someone who didn't value me. Someone who laughed at my fear. When I finally called him back, he answered mid-scream. He ranted about humiliation, about having to stand on the side of the road while officers searched the car. He didn't mention abandoning me. Not once. You stole my car, I said quietly. You left me alone in the woods. It was a prank. We were coming back. When? He went silent. When Richard, he didn't answer because he didn't have an answer. They weren't coming back anytime soon. They wanted me to panic. They wanted content. I ended the call with 6 words I never expected to say. Don't come home tonight. Stay with Chloe. You can't kick me out. I just did. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to liberation. When the ranger drove me home that night, the world outside the window looked strangely unfamiliar, like the landscape of someone else's life. Streetlights, familiar intersections. The quiet shape of my neighborhood, they all felt distant. I sat in the passenger seat, silently, hands curled around the straps of my backpack, replaying every moment from that clearing in the woods. The selfie, the peace sign, the laughter. Richard's voice screaming at me like I had committed a crime instead of surviving one. By the time we pulled into my driveway, night had fully settled. The air was cool, the house dark. I thanked the ranger, stepped inside, and locked the door behind me. Then I stood there in the hallway for a long moment, staring into the quiet. For years, this house felt like a shared space, a place where Richard's shoes lay tossed by the couch, where Chloe's visits brought noise and chaos, where Tessa's perfume lingered in the air long after she'd left. Now it felt like mine again, and only mine. I walked room to room, turning lights on slowly. Not because I was scared, but because everything felt surreal. I was home, and Richard wasn't. It should have felt lonely. It didn't. When my phone finally reconnected to the stronger home Wi-Fi, it buzzed violently with more notifications. The voicemail icons multiplied. The texts kept coming. The first was from Richard. I'm calling the police on you if you don't answer. Then another. Unlock the door. I'm coming home. This is ridiculous. Chloe had sent a flood of messages too. You're literally insane. This is actual psycho behavior. Tessa's crying. Richard's furious. Fix this. A final voice note from Tessa was just her laughing and saying, you really snapped, girl. Seek help. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I went to the front door, slid the deadbolt closed, then took a slow breath and reached for the toolkit under the hall closet shelf. Within minutes, I'd removed Richard's old key from the hanging rack and changed the locks. It wasn't petty. It wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. This was my home, bought with my money years before Richard ever entered my life. My name on the deed, my name on the taxes, my space, my rules. The moment that lock clicked into place, something inside me settled, a final boundary solid and immovable. It took Richard only 20 minutes to arrive. I watched through the peephole as he stormed up the steps, face twisted with rage, Chloe. Standing behind him in the driveway with her arms crossed like a backup singer to his tantrum. Tessa was sitting in her car, filming with her phone. Of course she was. Richard pounded on the door so hard the frame shook. Angela, open the damn door right now. I didn't move. He pounded again. Angela, I swear to God, open it. I pressed the button on the doorbell camera and spoke calmly, my voice echoing from the small speaker outside. No. He froze. What do you mean no? This is my home too. It's not, I said. It's mine. Legally, financially, on every document. You moved in after we started dating, but you were never added to anything. You can't kick me out. I just did. Chloe's voice shrieked in the background. You're unhinged. It was a prank. You abandoned me in the middle of the woods, I replied. That's not a prank. That's cruelty. Richard stepped closer to the camera. His voice dropped into that disappointed tone he loved using whenever he wanted to make me feel small. You're embarrassing yourself. Come outside like an adult and talk to me. You can talk to me when you understand what you did, I answered. Tonight, go stay with Chloe. You're being dramatic. And you're a grown man who stranded his girlfriend in a forest for content, Chloe yelled. This is why Richard can't joke with you. You ruin everything. I ended the call and turned the porch light off. Richard stayed for a few minutes, pacing, muttering, but eventually he left, yelling something to Chloe about calling Mom. I stood in the now silent house, once they were gone, breathing in the peaceful emptiness. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't doubt myself the way I used to. Instead, I felt an unfamiliar sense of steadiness. My phone buzzed again later that night, Richard's mother. Her voicemail was an emotional performance. Angela, sweetheart, you're tearing this family apart over a joke. Chloe and Richard told me everything. They were going to come back for you. They didn't mean any harm. You should have known it wasn't serious. You're making a scene, locking Richard out of his own home, calling the police. This isn't who you are. Please call me back. We need to fix this. As if abandoning someone in the woods was normal. As if humiliation was love. I deleted the voicemail. The next morning, the harassment campaign expanded. Richard's dad called to remind me that real couples don't call the police on each other. Chloe made a long social media rant implying I was unstable, dramatic, and trying to destroy Richard's life. Tessa, ever the loyal ex-girlfriend, added her own version, painting the three of them as victims of my overreaction. But what struck me most was how not one of them, not Chloe, not Tessa, not Richard, not his parents, had even once asked if I was safe. Not one. That was the clearest truth of all. That afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, found a reputable local attorney, and scheduled a consultation. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but because I finally understood something I should have realized a long time ago. People who think your suffering is entertainment don't love you. People who laugh while you're terrified don't deserve access to your life. People who abandon you once will abandon you again. I closed the laptop, feeling a strange sense of calm. For the first time in 4 years, the house felt like it belonged to me again. For the first 2 days after changing the locks, I expected everything to calm down. Maybe not peace, but at least silence. I thought the shock would wear off and Richard would finally understand why what he did went too far. Instead, things escalated in ways I didn't see coming. What started as a boundary quickly became a battlefield. The first detonation came from social media. I woke up to messages from coworkers, acquaintances, even an old classmate I hadn't spoken to in years. Are you okay? Is this about you? Saw Chloe's post? Is that what happened? A cold pit formed in my stomach. I opened my phone and there it was, the full-blown smear campaign. On her story, Chloe had uploaded a dramatic black and white photo of herself crying with text overlaid. My brother's girlfriend called the cops on us over a harmless prank, and now she's kicked him out of his own home. She's emotionally abusive and controlling. I can't stay silent anymore. Then came a slideshow of carefully curated lies. A screenshot of the police officer talking to them on the highway, framed to look like I'd maliciously set them up. A long paragraph claiming I isolated Richard from his family. Another accusing me of weaponizing the legal system to punish them for my own insecurities. Tessa added her own post. Some women can't handle being around real humor or real family bonds. They take everything personally. It's honestly sad. Not a single word about abandoning me in the woods. Not a single acknowledgement that I could have been injured, lost, or worse. Chloe's followers, mostly people who loved her chaotic content, were split. Some commented things like, "Girl, that wasn't a prank, that was dangerous. She had every right to call the cops if you stole her car." But others fully embraced the narrative. "Your brother should leave her. She sounds unhinged." Some people are so controlling. It was surreal watching strangers debate my sanity like it was a sport. I put my phone down, but it didn't stop. Because the next attack hit where it really mattered, my job. Around noon, my office manager knocked on my desk and said, "HR needs to see you." My stomach dropped. For a second, I wondered if this was some new prank, if Tessa had orchestrated something behind the scenes. I walked into the HR office and saw the HR director's expression, polite, professional, concerned. "Angela," she said, folding her hands, "we received an anonymous complaint alleging you've been discussing personal legal matters at work in a way that makes others uncomfortable." I blinked. Discussing legal matters at work, I hadn't even told my closest coworker what happened. My voice was steady. "It wasn't me. I haven't said a word about my personal life to anyone here. Someone's targeting me." She nodded slowly as if she already suspected it. Off the record, the anonymous complainant called from a number that showed up as Clark Tessa. That name mean anything to you? A bitter laugh escaped me. Unfortunately, yes. "We still have to document it," she said, "but HR will handle it. Keep your head down. Don't respond if they contact you again." Strike one from Chloe and Tessa, and they weren't done. Later that same afternoon, my property management company, who I sometimes hired for repairs, despite owning my house outright, called to inform me that someone claiming to be Mrs. Rayner had reported me for destroying property and violating safety codes. I almost choked. Mrs. Rayner didn't exist. I certainly wasn't her. And even if I were married, Richard had never lived here legally. I explained the situation. The manager sighed. "We've worked with you for years. We know better. I'll block the number." Strike two. I tried to brush it off, but the next hit was the worst one yet. A police officer called me the following morning. "We received a report from your boyfriend, Richard Rayner, claiming you stole a diamond necklace, a family ring, and $3,000 cash." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Those items don't exist," I said. "I documented every box when he collected his things. I have photos and timestamps." My lawyer met me at the station. I showed everything, images of jewelry boxes, clothing, every item I had packed for Richard when I asked him to pick up his belongings. None of it suggested missing jewels or cash. The officer studied the screenshots. "This is thorough. He'd need proof those items ever existed. Right now, it looks like a retaliatory report." Retaliatory, that word sat heavy on my tongue. Afterwards, in the parking lot, my lawyer looked at me with a calm certainty. "This isn't a prank anymore. This is harassment. Document everything." I did. A few days later, the next unbelievable incident happened. Richard, Chloe, and Tessa showed up at my house with a locksmith. I was inside. I watched the entire scene unfold through my security camera. "Chloe, she's locked him out illegally. This is Richard's home. Let us in." Locksmith: "Do you have ID with this address, Richard?" "It's complicated." Tessa: "She's unstable. Just let us inside." The locksmith shifted uncomfortably. "I can't proceed without proof, especially if there's a dispute." That's when I finally spoke through the speaker. "This is my home, solely mine. They have no legal right to enter." They all jumped back like they'd seen a ghost. The locksmith practically sprinted to his van. "I'm out. I'm not getting involved in whatever this is." Chloe started shouting, "She's lying. Richard lives here." But the cameras recorded everything. I called the non-emergency police line the moment their car sped off. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I handed over the footage. "This is attempted illegal entry," one of them said. "If they show up again, you can press charges." My lawyer filed for a protective order that same afternoon. She listed every incident, false reports, workplace harassment, the attempted break-in, social media, defamation, everything. Richard's lawyer sent back a furious message accusing me of escalating matters unnecessarily. My lawyer didn't even blink. "Escalation only happens when someone keeps climbing," she said, "and they haven't stopped." I believed her, because by then I understood something with painful clarity. They weren't pranking anymore. They were punishing me. Punishing me for daring to finally draw a boundary. Punishing me for not playing along with their cruelty. Punishing me for refusing to be their entertainment. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Not ever again. The day of the protective order hearing felt strangely calm. I woke up early, showered, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my documents neatly stacked in a folder. Photos, screenshots, timestamps, text logs, security footage, stills, months' worth of cruelty compressed into paper and ink. It didn't feel like preparing for a court battle. It felt like preparing to finally tell the truth. My lawyer met me at the courthouse entrance, her expression sharp and confident. "Stay steady," she said. "They'll try to twist the narrative. That's all they have." Inside the courtroom, Richard sat at the table opposite mine. He looked smaller than I remembered, a little pale, a little unsure, but still insulated by the presence of Chloe and Tessa flanking him like guard dogs. Chloe glared at me like she could set me on fire with her eyes. Tessa smirked, arms crossed, as if she were watching the preview of a movie she thought she'd enjoy. Richard's lawyer wore a rehearsed expression of stern disappointment, already gearing up for the performance. When the judge walked in, the room settled with a heavy silence. Richard's lawyer began with predictable theatrics. "Your Honor, my client is being unfairly targeted and retaliated against. This is a simple relationship misunderstanding blown wildly out of proportion. The alleged abandonment was a harmless—" "It was not harmless," my lawyer interjected smoothly. "And it was not a misunderstanding." The judge raised a hand. "I'll be the one to determine relevance. Continue." Richard's lawyer launched into a grand explanation about how some couples have different humor styles and how Angela's sensitivity escalated a joke into a legal crisis. He even suggested that my locking Richard out of his own home was emotional abuse. My lawyer slowly walked to the center and began distributing printed evidence. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "let's begin with facts." She presented the police report from the night in the woods, then the photo Chloe had sent of all three of them laughing in my car, then the text messages, then the ranger's statement about the danger of leaving someone alone in that location at dusk. The judge looked at Richard. "You left Ms. Waldrop alone in a remote forest with no transportation wallet or supplies." Richard shifted. It was a prank. The judge cut him off. "Do you understand how quickly temperatures drop in that park after sunset? People get hypothermia. People die. You claim this was harmless." Richard didn't answer. My lawyer continued. "Next, we have the false report of stolen jewelry and cash. There is no evidence such items ever existed, nor that Ms. Waldrop had access to them. But we do have time-stamped photos of every item she packed for Mr. Rayner." The judge reviewed the images. "Why file a report about non-existent property?" Richard looked to Chloe for help. She jumped in. "She's manipulating everything Angela's always been controlling." "Your Honor, she twists things so she can play the victim." "Are you an attorney?" the judge asked sharply. Chloe's mouth snapped shut. "Then sit down." Tessa muttered something under her breath. The judge didn't miss it. "And you," he said, turning his gaze on her, "I understand you contacted Ms. Waldrop's workplace, pretending to be an anonymous employee. That is harassment, and criminal, if you continue." Tessa's face went rigid. My lawyer then introduced video stills from the attempted break-in with the locksmith. The judge reviewed the footage with the expression of someone who had seen far too much stupidity in his career. So he said slowly, "You attempted to force entry into Ms. Waldrop's home using a locksmith after being explicitly told she was the sole legal owner." Richard swallowed. Chloe looked away. Tessa stiffened. The judge leaned back. "I see a pattern. Retaliatory behavior, harassment, false police reports, public defamation, attempted unlawful entry, and the initial incident of abandoning Ms. Waldrop in a dangerous environment." The room was dead silent. "Protective order granted," the judge said decisively. "Mr. Rayner, you are prohibited from contacting Ms. Waldrop directly or indirectly. You may communicate only through legal counsel." "Ms. Rayner, excuse me, Ms. Chloe Rayner, and Ms. Clark, you are prohibited from contacting her, her workplace, or approaching her residence. Violations will result in contempt charges." "Understood." Richard's voice was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." Chloe muttered something hostile. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Would you like that entered into the record?" She shut her mouth immediately. Tessa glared, but said nothing. The gavel struck, ending the hearing. As we stepped outside, Chloe hissed at me, just loud enough for the echo to carry down the courthouse steps. "All this over a stupid joke. You destroyed my brother's life." My lawyer turned to me. "Do you want to add that to the file?" I shook my head. "I'm done giving them attention." A few days later came the divorce mediation. Even though Richard and I were never married, in the rewritten version, the structure of the separation remained similar: joint financial detangling, division of shared funds, and legal separation of property rights. In your script rewrite, this still becomes a court-supervised separation of assets, obligations, and spousal support determination. Richard's lawyer came in, hot, demanding monthly support payments, half the equity in my home, temporary use of my car, most of the furniture. My lawyer almost laughed. Her home is premarital and separate property. Her car is separate property. Her assets are separate. We can discuss reasonable temporary support, but nothing outrageous. Richard's lawyer tried the angle that Richard sacrificed his emotional stability for the relationship. My lawyer responded dryly. He sacrificed her safety for a prank. The mediator eventually proposed, "I keep the house, car, and all personal assets. Joint savings split evenly. Modest temporary support, less than half of what Richard demanded. Each person pays their own legal fees." It was more than fair. Richard looked at me, then not angry, not smug, but hollow. A man who finally realized the consequences of his choices. Maybe he thought I'd soften. Maybe he expected the old version of me, the woman who tolerated everything. Instead, I simply nodded. I was done. When we exited the courthouse, he stopped me at the bottom of the steps. "Angela," he said quietly, "was it worth it?" I looked at him, this man I once loved, and felt nothing but clarity. I didn't end anything I said. "You did that when you laughed while I was terrified." He swallowed hard. Chloe waited at the curb, arms crossed, scowling at me. Tessa leaned against her car, eyes dark. None of them mattered anymore. I walked away without looking back. The strange thing about peace is how loud it can be when you're not used to it. After years of walking on emotional eggshells, never knowing when Chloe and Tessa would prank me next, never knowing whether Richard would defend me or laugh along the silence inside my house, felt almost unreal. No slammed doors, no mocking giggles, no chaos, just soft morning light through the blinds and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in a long time, the space felt like mine, and I felt like me. The first thing I did after legally finalizing everything was upgrade the security system, not out of fear, but out of caution. Cameras on every angle, reinforced locks motion lights. Not because I expected Richard or Chloe or Tessa to try anything again, but because being abandoned in the woods strips away any illusion of safety. Safety, I learned, isn't something you assume, it's something you build. The second thing I did was something I'd always wanted, but never allowed myself. I adopted a dog. A big, awkward, beautiful German Shepherd mix with oversized paws and a constantly confused expression. When I filled out the adoption papers, the shelter volunteer smiled and said, "He'll protect you with his whole heart." I named him Timber. He follows me everywhere, rests his head on my knee when I work, and sleeps at the foot of my bed like a guardian who takes his role seriously. The house doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels alive. Meanwhile, word traveled through the grapevine. Mutual acquaintances, co-workers, who still followed Chloe online. People who whispered updates without meaning to gossip. Apparently, Richard moved in with Chloe temporarily, but things went downhill fast. Tessa practically lived there, too. 3 people in a cramped apartment with no boundaries and no stability turned out to be its own kind of punishment. Chloe complained online about freeloaders. Tessa ranted about ungrateful men. Richard lamented that everyone abandoned him. Not once did he seem to understand the irony. At work, things smoothed out. HR wrapped up their required investigation in less than a week after confirming that no one had ever heard me discuss my personal life at the office. My manager pulled me aside afterward and said, "For what it's worth, we know the complaint came from outside. We're glad you handled it professionally." I didn't tell her how close I'd come to crying in her office. Not out of fear, out of relief that someone finally believed me without explanation. I kept my distance from social media, from gossip, from anything related to Richard or his family. I wasn't interested in reliving anything. I wanted new air, new habits, new memories. Which is probably why, on a rainy Tuesday morning, when I stopped at my local cafe before work, I didn't recognize the significance of the moment until much later. I was reaching for the last blueberry muffin at the same time as another hand. A man's hand. "Oh, sorry," he said, pulling back slightly. "Go ahead." "We can split it," I said without thinking. "I don't need a whole one." He laughed, surprised, warm. "That's a fair compromise." We shared the muffin at a corner table because the place was crowded, and it felt awkward not to. His name was Daniel. Dark hair, soft eyes, a calm presence. The kind of person who didn't fill silence with noise. As we talked, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't realized I needed. At one point he asked, "Your weekend go, okay?" I hesitated, old reflex, but then I caught myself. I didn't owe anyone the edited version of my life. I had a rough couple of weeks, I admitted, but I'm doing better now. He nodded gently like he understood without needing details. We finished the muffin. He asked if I'd be back the next morning. I said maybe. He smiled and said, "Well, just in case, I hope your day goes smoothly." A small thing, a kind thing. And for someone who had gotten used to cruelty, disguised as humor kindness felt almost shocking. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other. Sometimes by coincidence, sometimes because one of us arrived early and waited a few minutes longer than usual. He never pushed, never made assumptions, never mocked vulnerability. It was the exact opposite of everything I had been conditioned to accept. One morning, he handed me a coffee with a message written on the cup sleeve. "Still not stranded." I stared at it, first confused, then amused, then touched. "You remembered," I said softly. "You mentioned you like hiking," he said. "I figured. Maybe you deserved a joke that wasn't cruel." It wasn't flirtation, it wasn't forced, it was gentle. And for the first time since everything happened, I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. Not love, not infatuation, just possibility. I'm not rushing anything. I'm not repeating the mistakes of my past. I'm moving carefully, fully aware that healing is not a straight line. But I'm learning what healthy looks like, what respect feels like, what safety means. Because safety isn't just locks or alarms or a dog sleeping at your feet. Safety is also someone laughing with you instead of at you. Someone asking if you're okay before asking anything else. Someone who doesn't leave you behind physically or emotionally. People sometimes ask if I regret how hard I came down on Richard. The police report, the separation, the protective order, the boundaries he never expected me to enforce. I don't regret any of it. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It wasn't pettiness. It was self-preservation. It was reclaiming dignity after years of ignoring my own hurt. It was believing my fear mattered. It was deciding I deserved more than being someone's punchline. Richard showed me who he was the moment he drove away laughing, leaving me alone among the trees. And when people show you who they are, you have two choices: ignore it and suffer, or believe them and act. I chose to believe him, and then I chose myself. The anxiety is fading. The nightmares have stopped. Timber keeps me grounded. My home feels like mine again. And slowly, with patience and honesty, I'm letting myself be open to something new, with someone who has done nothing but show me kindness.